Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Maaike and today we are going to be talking about my July wrap-up. So these are the books I read in July, and in total I read 6 books, 2 of which are audiobooks and the other 4 are paper editions. So let me start with the audiobooks first. And the first audiobook that I finished in the month of July was the audiobook version of this one. This is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. And it's an audiobook that I really enjoyed. I do have to say though, that I don't think that this book is a great one as an audiobook. I definitely, now that I've listened to it, want to go back to it so I can retain more of the information. I definitely listened to this quite a lot as I was falling asleep, which is why I couldn't really get through it in the month of June. Because I just kept falling asleep at the same point all the time, and I had to put the audiobook back and then I forgot where I had left off. So I'm pretty sure I've skipped a few bits here and there. I have to say though that he has some really interesting observations that he makes, which is why I would love to read the whole thing from cover to cover at some point in time. However, not anytime soon, because I feel I did get enough out of this audiobook that I sort of get the gist of what this book is trying to do. Like I said, it has a couple of very interesting takes on things that have happened in history and why those things are significant for our history and all that. And I just really thought that this was a very refreshing perspective on the history of human beings, you could say. So that's why I did really enjoy this. And I think because I read it as an audiobook, I didn't love it as much because I also felt that the narrator was a little bit boring at times. So I definitely think that the book itself is great, but maybe the fact that I listened to it as an audiobook wasn't the smartest choice for this one. Audiobook number 2 that I read is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. And in case you don't know what this book is about, it's about a young boy called Elwood who is stopped on his way to school, and he's taken, well, he's riding in a stolen car and he's taken to this reform school called the Nickel Academy. And from there on, we sort of follow Elwood as he is at this school, which is not a very pleasant place to be at. It's just not. It's not necessarily a school, but more like a torture chamber, you know. So it's a very harrowing book, very heart-wrenching, and I really appreciated the story in the way it was told. A lot of people have been critiquing this book that they couldn't really connect with the characters, but I think because I listened to it on audio, that really helped me to listen to these characters' voices and really sort of see who these people are. And don't forget that it's written from the perspective of 14-year-old boys, so they sort of talk like that as well. So that is of course going to influence the story, but I felt that Colson Whitehead did a very good job and I really was blown away. I also read another book by him a few years ago called The Underground Railroad, and I really enjoyed it as well. And I thought that his writing style in that book and this book is a little bit similar because he has this almost journalistic approach to things. It's very sort of like reporting style. There's very little reflection of the characters of what's actually happening to them. However, I think it really fits the story and the things that are going on, why, you know, that just doesn't happen. These boys are just sort of like trying to live their life and trying to get the most out of every day, even though they are going through some really gruesome things. So is this a beautiful book? It's not, but it is a very important one. And because of the important topic and the fact that for me, the story really came alive, that's why I did give this 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read 4 physical copies in the month of July. And the first one I finished was Taylor Jenkins' Reid, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I picked this up straight after I read Daisy Jones and the Six by the same author because I completely fell in love with the way that story worked. However, I already mentioned at the time that I was afraid that it was a little bit of a gimmick for her, and I feel that that is the case in this book. However, let me also say that it didn't take away from any of the enjoyment that I felt when reading this book. This is, again, a very clever story. If you don't know what this book is about, it is the story of the lady called Evelyn Hugo, who is this sort of like Hollywood starlet from the 1950s. She's getting a little bit older and she wants to tell her story to a journalist, and we get her life story. And it's being told alongside the fact that she had 7 husbands and who they were, and she wants to do this tell-all tale, and that's what this book is about. It was, again, it had a very clever twist at the end, like the Daisy Jones and the Six book. So for me, this book was very enjoyable, but it's one of those books you read once and then you kind of know what's going to happen. So I don't think this is going to be like a long-standing favorite by any means, but I really, really did enjoy it. I do think, though, that I like Daisy Jones and the Six better. For me, because it had a wider cast of characters, I felt that the narration of that story was a little bit more cleverly done. This one is nice too, but since we essentially only have like, well, 2 narrators, we have the journalist and we have Evelyn, and that kind of brings it all together for me. So it's a good one. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely up there as like one of the favorite books of this year for sure. It's a really good one, but I think that I prefer the other one a bit better. Next up, I wanted to make sure that I finished this series in the month of July, and I did. A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is the 3rd book in that series, so I can't say too much about the plot without spoiling everything. So I'm just going to say that this follows Farah, who is human at the start of this series, and then, you know, she encounters Fae, and her entire life is, you know, switched upside down. So this is a culmination of all the action that's been set up in the other 2 books. I have to say that this has to be my favorite book in the series, which is a little bit controversial because most people seem to enjoy book 2 the most. But I just felt that this is where, because everything came together, we finally started to wrap things up, and that was really lovely. I do have to say that, like with Throne of Glass, there were a couple of like wrap-ups in this book that were a little bit like convenient. Like, oh yeah, of course that's gonna happen. So for me, it was a nice wrap-up to a series for sure. I just felt that some of it was a bit like far-fetched, a little superfluous. Like, did we really need all of those passages where, you know, there's all this rivalry going on, and like some of it just felt like it didn't need to be there, and I already felt that way in the 2nd book. This could have been half the size for sure, but no, we get a like 700-page book, and it was enjoyable enough. I have to say, I read this over the course of 3 days, definitely captured my interest, but I don't think I will be going back to this series. I didn't really enjoy Farah as a character. Rhysand has to be my favorite character in the entire series. Like, he adds interest. I would have loved this story from his perspective. Just saying. Then I think it would have been a much better book. Just saying. Up next was a little bit like another like fantasy kind of story, and it was the 4th book in the Heron Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is Summer Night, and I tend to really enjoy these Harry Dresden Files books. If you don't know what this is about Harry Dresden, who is a wizard who works out of Chicago. So it's a bit like urban fantasy, you could say. It has like one foot in detective work because he very often helps out or gets help from Chicago police departments, and he also encounters vampires and werewolves, and in this particular case we get a lot of the fairies in here as well. The Fae are involved, and I really like these stories. You just shouldn't go in with very high expectations. Like, this is an action-packed movie, something like Die Hard, but then with magic on a page. That's the way I see these books. Like, they're just brainless entertainment, and I don't try to get anything out of it apart from a fast-paced, plot-driven story that has a bit of a dimwit for a main character, because that's how I feel about Harry. He's a little bit of a tool, for sure, especially when it comes to women. Like, he's not the brightest bulb in the shed by any means, but he does grow as a character as the series progresses, I feel, and I do really appreciate just action-packed stories. There's a battle scene in a Walmart. I really loved it. I just really did. I really enjoy these books. I don't read too many of them in one go, though, because then I feel it becomes a bit too much. I tend to read one of these a year, and this was like, and mostly in the summertime as well. Like, these are just these like easy like poolside reads, even though I don't have a pool, but you kind of catch my drift. And last but not least, I also finished this book, and this is a reread for me. And this was in my 2020 TBR video that I wanted to reread it this year. This is A.M. Holmes's This Book Will Save Your Life. And this book I read fresh out of college more than a decade ago, and I was like, I've always put this in my top 10 of all-time favorite books, and I would like to know if I still like it as much. And oh boy, oh yes, I read this again over like a 2-day period. I raced through it, and now I remember again why I like it so much. On the back, it's blurb by Stephen King, comparing it to Catch-22 and Catcher in the Rye. Didn't really like Catch-22 all that much, but I think that the parts about Catch-22 that I did enjoy, it takes, and then it sort of puts it into this like, well, it's not like Holden Caulfield because he's a teenager, but we get a middle-aged guy in this one. But it does also take these elements from Catcher in the Rye that I really enjoy and sort of puts it together in this very absurdist, everything that is wrong with Hollywood kind of situation in this book, and I absolutely loved it. I don't think this is for everyone because it is a little bit weird at times. But I have to say, I like weird books. And if you don't know what this book is about, because I don't think a lot of people talk about this, this is about a guy called Richard Novak, and he's running his life to a T. It just doesn't involve a lot of human interaction. And he is one day taken to the hospital with chest pains, and they don't really know what's going on. And on his way back to the hospital, he stops at a donut shop, which is very unusual for him because he's someone with like a personal trainer who lives up in the Hollywood Hills, and you know, he has his dietitian come to him to deliver him meals, so he has no reason to go to a donut shop. So he hasn't been to one in years, and he sort of befriends the owner of this little donut shop in a very weird situation. And then from there on, things just kind of snowball and catapult into one bizarre moment after another. Like he has to move house because there is a sinkhole, but it's like he almost comes alive again. And at the end of the story, it's like, okay, I'm finally living my life the way a person should. And that's what I've always taken away from this book, but it's just told in such a witty, funny way. There's lots of one-liners in here. There's a lot of dialogue, and it just kind of like cuts off in the middle of a conversation and like, okay, what's going on here? So it is a bit of a Marmite one for sure, but I love this, and yes, it has affirmed its top 10 position for me and one of my all-time like favorite books for sure. It still is. It just is. So yeah, those are the books that I wanted to mention in today's video. Those are the 6 books I read in the month of July. We definitely did better on the page count than I normally do. I'm currently going to also be doing in this month Tome Topple, so I hope to be able to read a very hefty volume for sure, and I'm trying to finish some other books before that happens. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 1 video a week on here on Fridays, so I hope to see you again next week. See you in my next one. Bye-bye.